glorified.
Sometime in 2014, that was last year, early last year, I was in church on a Sunday when I had an abdominal pain. It was a very sharp pain in my abdomen. And then I decided I was going to go to the hospital the next day. The next day I was at the hospital. I was there from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I was made to go through a series of tests. At the end of it, I was told, I got the result. I sent it to my husband, and his response was, God forbid. My husband is a medical doctor, so he probably understood. It took time for me to understand. In fact, I had to go on Google to understand what the result was about. And the summary was that I had inflamed fallopian tubes, inflamed pelvics, and multiple fibroids. I also met with Pastor along the line. I told him about the result, and then I told him that, the result notwithstanding, I'd heard of testimonies in Koza, I'd heard of his own testimony as well, and then that I also believed that God was going to do the same for me. His response to that was, yes, I believe, yes, I believe. And for me, that was it. And every time I went to church and after the sermon, a seed was called, I went out with the result and a seed in my hand. And then, I was just always worshiping with God with the result in my hand and the seed. I did that until, for a long time, until I felt a release in my heart. The pastor has taught us several times that we need to identify fertile grounds and begin to sow. So I started looking out for people who were pregnant, people who had children, people who had children basically. And then I started to sow into their lives. Most of them didn't know what was happening. In fact, nobody knew what was happening. They probably thought I was just giving their kids gifts or giving them gifts for their kids, but I knew what I was trusting God for. People would usually say for women who have fibroids, they have irregular menstrual cycles, they have heavy menstrual cycles. I never had any of them. Everything was fine with me. I was very perfect. So it was really strange, but I kept on sowing the seeds, I kept on sowing it. And then I remember sometime in June, 2014 still, I was not in town, I was out of town, but I was streaming live online on that Sunday when Pastor preached about the battle cry. And then at the end, after the prayers, he said, we should scream, it is time, supernatural supply. And then I did that. Looking back now, if I had to count from the time I had the baby to that time, it was that period that I had the miracle. Because sometime in July, after the battle cry that Pastor preached about, sometime in July, I met with Pastor, and the moment I greeted him, the moment I opened my mouth to say, good morning, sir, I celebrate you, sir, the first thing he said was, you sound pregnant. And then I just received it with the whole of my heart. And then I told my husband about it also. Immediately, my husband is a faith man. He went and bought lots of pregnancy test kits and all of that. When I got home, he asked me to use them. I did use them, but the result wasn't clear. It was a bit faint. So we decided that, okay, we're going to go to another hospital to check. So we went to a sonographer for a scan. And then while the guy was checking, my husband asked him, so can you see the fibroids? He said no, that there were no fibroids at all. My uterus was clear, there were no fibroids, but that there was something moving in my uterus. And then he went to the speaker, he turned on the speaker, and then we could hear the heartbeat of a baby. And then he said, look, there's a baby in there. The baby is about 5 weeks old. And I said, glory to God.
When your fallopian tube is inflamed, you have difficulty pushing the ovaries to the uterus, and if you cannot push the ovaries to the uterus where the egg is met, you're going to have difficulty conceiving or maintaining conception. So the significance of somebody who's able to conceive with an inflamed fallopian tube is beyond words. In fact, it's a miracle.
You remember one of those preachers during the 12 days of glory said to us that the joke of a prophet is actually a prophecy. That is my story, because it was I'm sure when Pastor said it probably was a joke, but that was my prophecy. And so the journey, the conception journey began. And then I was very all right. I never spat. I never had any morning sickness. I was never tired. I never slept excessively. I was perfect. In fact, I went to the gym every time. But sometime in October, I think it was the last Sunday in October, I was in church when I had this pain. I had to leave church. The pain was severe. And then the next morning, it was an emergency. By 6:30 a.m., I was in the hospital. And the doctors came, they were rushing around. They needed to kill the pain, and then they said I was dilating. The baby was, I was giving way. The baby was coming out. So they needed to secure the baby to ensure that the baby didn't come out. They scheduled me for a surgery. But because I was in pain, I couldn't do the surgery at that time. It's a sacrilege, it's a minor surgery. I couldn't do it because I was in pain. That was on a Monday. On Tuesday, Brother Yemi came to the hospital to see me at the hospital with communion. It was after communion service he came. And then even though I was in pain, I was able to get up to take the communion, and then he prayed with me. But the moment I took the communion, before he left, I said, Brayemi, I don't have any pains again. He said, just relax and sleep, and I'll check on you again the next morning. By the time he came the next day, I was up and about. The doctors came around, they were surprised. Everybody was surprised that the pain had gone and I could move about. But then, the gynae still said, look, even though you're not in pains, I need to secure the baby. So I still did the surgery anyway, and then it was successful. And, I kept on with the baby. And then when I was about 37 weeks gone, I was doing my checkups regularly. Everything was fine with me. There was nothing. At 37 weeks, I was told that there was no fluid around the baby. It's called amniotic fluid. The fluid around the baby had diminished. That it had, that it was drained. There was no fluid. I was scheduled, for induction to be induced, and I was induced on a Saturday morning. At about 10 a.m. on Saturday morning was when I checked in and I was induced. But the baby wouldn't come. So I was there in labor all through Saturday and all through Sunday. And on Monday, I was still in labor. And then, the doctors they started becoming a bit scared. And they were wondering, why would I be in labor? It was almost going to be 72 hours. And then at about 10 p.m. on Monday night, another doctor came to me and said he needed to examine me. And then when he did, he said to me that he was sorry, but that I wasn't dilating at all, that I was only 3 cm dilated from Saturday. Oh my God. And then I said, so what are the options here? And then he asked me, what are the options? I said, no, you are the doctor, you tell me. And then he said, we need to take the baby out. And then I said, okay, can you give me some hours to think about it? Can we do this tomorrow morning since it's already 10 p.m.? And then he said, I don't even have 5 minutes to do this. And then I told my husband to, let us get in touch with, because we were not in Nigeria, so we needed to get in touch with our church in Nigeria and speak with the senior pastors. And Pastor and Mommy D did something that, that just blew me off. Pastor said, what are we talking about here? God has gone ahead of you. The angels have made way for you. Go and return with testimonies. And then Mommy D just said, because it was at night, she just said, Sister Tobi, celebrate you. Come back with testimonies. Good night, celebrate you. For me, that was it, because it wasn't, Father, in the name of Jesus, it wasn't anything scary. Maybe that would have scared me, but the way they talked was so soft and easy, and then it gave me a lot of strength. And then I looked at the doctor and I said, we can go now. And then I was wheeled into, the theater, and everything was done. And in less than 15 minutes, I was back in my ward with my baby in my arms. Everything went well. The surgery didn't go. It wasn't very easy for them because I lost blood, but they didn't have to give me blood, because they were able to rebleed or rebuild my blood immediately. You know, my blood, even though I lost blood, they were able to just walk around it, and then I didn't have to slip into coma or anything. And then after that night, by the next morning, they came and checked me, and they were surprised how fast I was healing. As a matter of fact, they were going to discharge me that night. Another doctor had to say, you know, let's just hold on till the next morning. So in less than 48 hours, as a matter of fact, it was just a little over 24 hours after I had the baby through CS, I was out of the hospital. The plaster was taken out, and then I was allowed to go home.
And it goes without saying that for this young lady, against all odds, to have gotten pregnant with chronic adenitis, with fibroid, with inflamed uterus, and every other thing that she had, I mean, this is the work of God. This is a huge miracle. And this baby is going to be a blessing to his generation.
On behalf of my husband, and on behalf of Otnel too, would like to say thank you so much, Pastor B. Thank you, Mommy D. Like I always say to Pastor, I'm your firstborn. I'm sure you never knew, but I know. You don't have to know, but I am your firstborn. Thank you for always being there for me. Thank you for always having the right word to say. I say to people that I have no doubt that I am the apple of God's eyes, because He always puts words into your mouth for me every time. Thank you, Mommy D. Thank you, thank you, thank you for teaching me to be a good woman, a good wife. Thank you for teaching me to be a good mother. I celebrate you.